Hi, welcome to the Global Grid Experience. I'm glad you're here. I'm Erica, your host. Today we're talking with Beth Monke. I wanted to invite her on the show because I wanted to hear about climate action from a religious or spiritual perspective. Beth is a pastor at the Grove Lake Lutheran Church in Pelican Rapids, Minnesota, and she's a climate activist, which I love. That's an amazing combo. She's the Citizens Climate Lobby, or CCL, co-leader for the Fergus Falls chapter in Minnesota. I'm also a proud member of Citizens Climate Lobby, which is a nonpartisan organization that empowers everyday people to work together on climate policy. There are 420 plus chapters across the US and 150 plus international chapters on 6 continents. Whoop, whoop. Pretty cool if you're looking for ways to get involved. Beth is also a former outpatient mental health therapist. So here we go. How are you, Beth?
I am doing really well, Erica. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I asked you, Beth, to join us because you're the one I often go to when I'm pulling my hair out on climate action or the lack of climate action on a policy level and how to keep some bit of my sanity, my peace, and some hope intact. So I love that you bring a faith perspective, a can-do attitude, and a responsibility to act, and your climate action work that I really admire. So, Beth, are you ready? Should we begin?
Sure.
Okay. So, what I wanted to share with people is how does your faith relate to your climate change activism?
Well, I started getting active on climate change issues after our family took a vacation to a place called Holden Village, which is a very remote Lutheran camp in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. And there are theologians from all over the world that speak and do workshops there. And I happened to go, this was in 2006, and I happened to go to one by a theologian, Barbara Rossing, who is pretty well known in Lutheran circles anyway. And she did a workshop on how climate change will affect the world's poor. And at that point, I had not even really connected any dots about that. I'd heard about climate change and some of the things that scientists were predicting, but I had not really thought about how it would impact the world's poor. And in listening to her, my eyes were really opened to the justice issues related to climate change, meaning that people that live in poverty around the world have done the least to cause climate change, but they are suffering from it the first and the most. And so that's really what spurred me on to this activism.
What do you feel is your responsibility to your community and planet from a faith perspective?
Well, I feel like our faith is rooted in creation, at least in the Christian faith and in many other faiths too, I think. But especially in our Christian faith, it's rooted in creation. You know, we have 2 creation stories in Christianity. The first one is in Genesis 1, and it's really all about the ordering of creation. And when I read that creation story, you know, it's God created the heavens and the earth, and it's ordered in a certain way. And when you look at the ordering of creation, humans are last, and God said it was good. When God created every part of creation, God said it was good, not just humans. And when I look at the ordering of creation, to me, it appears that we see how we are dependent. Humans are dependent on everything that comes before. We're dependent on the waters of the earth. We're dependent on the things that grow. We're dependent on the other animals. So yeah, we were the last to be created, but not necessarily the best. We were part of all of the creation together. And we don't get very far if we don't have the other stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think our responsibility is given in the Bible, particularly in that first creation story when God, you know, gives humanity the charge to till and keep the land. And a lot of people don't. Well, actually, that one is in the second creation story. In the first creation story, there's that word dominion, which a lot of times people get a little bit confused about. There's a preposition in the Hebrew that goes along with that word dominion, and it can be interpreted either over, dominion over, or dominion among. And I like to think of it as dominion among. We are charged with keeping our world in order, but we're just among all the other parts of creation. And the other thing I like about that second creation story where God creates Adam out of the dirt, that we are created from the earth itself, and that God gives Adam a charge to till and keep the land. And that word keep in the Hebrew is the word shamar, which means to protect. It's the same exact Hebrew word that's used in verses like, may the Lord protect and keep you. And so, or may the Lord protect and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you. That is the same word. So there's an understanding that it's our job to protect this creation that God has given us. So I feel like that's our responsibility as creation. From a faith perspective, we always also have to look at the gospel and Jesus' direction to us in and guidance to us in Matthew 25, where he says, what you've done to the least of these, you've done unto me. When we consume to the detriment of people in poor countries around the world, we do that to Jesus directly. That's what Matthew 25 tells us. And so, again, our responsibility is to them to try to protect them. We try to protect the vulnerable. That is all over in the Bible. If people say they're Christian and they read their Bible and they haven't gotten that much out of it, I wonder, what parts of the Bible are you reading? Because that is over and over again. God talks about justice to the widow, the orphan, the oppressed. It's just very clear what our job is. And I am not the only faithful person that is saying this. I've been so inspired by Pope Francis and also now Pope Leo the Fourth. I just read that Pope Leo just had the first green mass of his tenure as Pope. And I just read a little something from that mass. He said in that mass, the world needed to change its mindset about the planet and what is causing the world to burn. Quote, we must pray for the conversion of so many people inside and out of the church who still don't recognize the urgency of caring for our common home. And then he goes on to talk about the disasters and how that is impacting so many people. And he says that they are in part caused by the excesses of being human with our lifestyle. And Pope Francis has written a lot about that too. So, yeah, I take my lead from those important leaders as well.
So let's get on to what people can do. What tips or approaches do you have for those in the faith community and out trying to talk with others about climate change and environmental concerns that can spur, shared activism? You talked about forming a green team. Is that something you want to share with us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for people in faith communities, that is a really great way to start. I like to give a couple anecdotes on this. One is a friend of mine who lives in Alexandria, Minnesota. I think she's 80 years old now, and or 79. She could easily just sit back and be retired and not do much of anything. She lives a real good life. But she decided to get up in front of her Welka group, the women's group at her church, and just say, I would like to start a green team. And this is why. And she explained her story of why she's concerned. And then she said to me, well, I thought I'll just put a sign up sheet out. I don't know if anyone will sign up, but we'll see. And that night she got 12 people from just that one meeting to sign up to be on this green team at her church. And they are doing amazing things. They do organics, recycling, they use compostables, or I believe that they also have volunteers to do dishwashing and stuff like that. They're doing all kinds of education in their congregation. Now they've become such an integral part of their church that their pastor had said to them, because there's 12 of them on there, that he wanted a representative from their committee on every one of the committees in the church. So, for instance, the education committee, how do we bring forth creation when we talk to young people about our faith? If it's the building committee, what do we do that relates to climate change? Do we have an energy audit for our building, which is a really important thing that churches can do because we have a lot of old buildings that are very leaky and probably some of them not very well insulated. So I think it's just really cool. And even like the worship committee, how do we integrate creation into the worship that we do, just lifting up creation? So another story that I have is from my internship last year at a very small rural congregation, Tunseth Lutheran Church. And, it's in the middle of farmland, very purple congregation. But we did a season of creation. So for 3 Sundays, we had a focus of creation. I used a liturgy that was based on the natural world and just lifting up the Creator God. When we say our Apostles' Creed, we really spell out that we believe in God the Creator, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Spirit, the three in one. And in our church year, it's interesting because liturgically, we have, quite a long time where we talk about Jesus, and then, which is basically Advent through Easter. And then we kind of go through the Easter season, and then we go into Pentecost, which is the Holy Spirit. But we don't have really a part of the church year that's dedicated to the God, the Creator. And so a lot of people, a lot of theologians really feel that that's an important thing for us to add to the liturgical calendar is a season of creation or a season to lift up the Creator. At the little church I was at, we did, like I said, 3 weeks. My sermons were more conversational, one with a farmer in the church who was also our church council president, who was using some sustainable agriculture practices. And so we had a little dialogue. And then I brought my friend in who'd started the green team. She was part of the sermon for another one of the weeks. And then we had a retired park ranger. If anybody listening knows Don Del Greco, he was the park ranger at Maplewood and is retired now, but he's also just a wonderful wildlife watercolor artist. And so we brought in all of his watercolor paintings, or a lot of them, and he preached on the last of those 3 Sundays. So it was just a really fun way to get the conversation going. And then eventually later in the year, the church council made a decision to go to compostable products and to do organics recycling. So they made some steps too. It wasn't just talk, there was some action that went with it. So those kinds of things. A lot of churches do pollinator gardens. But the other thing that I think we don't probably do enough of in the church is getting involved politically. And I think there is definitely a civic role for us to play, even within our faith communities, of letter writing, of letting our legislators know that this is important to us because of our faith. And most of our legislators are faithful people as well. So, I think it behooves us to communicate with them on a faith-based level. So those are just some things that come to mind.
What are some of your favorite ways of getting hold of legislators? What are some tools you use?
Well, in CCL, we do a lot of just organizing meetings, trying to meet face to face with legislative aides. CCL does that 2 times a year with DC legislators. And also we are with the in-district aide many times. And that's my favorite way because I like getting to know the staff and forming a relationship with them. I think we are living in such a polarized climate right now where we're so tempted to demonize the other side or who we perceive to be the other side. And I don't think that in the long term that serves us well, because I think to tackle this climate crisis, we have to work together. we have to work in a bipartisan way. Yeah, I just think we have to try to communicate in a respectful way. And so in CCL, we do that through letter writing too, and phone calling and all that kind of stuff as well.
Last question is, what can you say to folks out there that can feel, like I said at the beginning, you can feel hopeless? How can you help people to work through these challenging times?
Well, that's another thing I like about CCL because it is bipartisan. And so I feel like in Citizens Climate Lobby, we get a pretty neutral view of what's going on in the legislature, rather than a lot of our media outlets are very biased, whether it's the right or the left, because sometimes we don't really hear the most positive news stories because it's not hyped up enough for news outlets to report that, oh, there's this bipartisan bill that actually is coming through Congress. You never hear about that, but they happen all the time. I just feel like that is part of how you get hope, is to really get a good rounded picture of what is actually going on and not constantly listening to things that's demonizing the other side, because that leads us in a really bad black hole of despair, is what I think. Yeah. And I would say prayer too. I mean, when you look at the great people that were leaders in movements in the past, whether it was Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, they rooted their action in their faith and in prayer. I have to believe that every one of those people really relied on prayer for their strength and to be able to do the things that they did. And I think that gives us hope too when we make that part of our spiritual practice, is to pray and pray for strength in this time.
That was Beth Monke from Fergus Falls, Minnesota. Thank you, Beth, and thank you all for listening and being a part of the Global Grid Experience. You can check out more stories at theglobalgridexperience.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Take care. Talk soon.